Service Fabric 6.1 runtime release today on the Azure blog. So go and find that, check it out.
Did you say 6.1?
So 6.2.
6.2. You did say that.
Yes, 6.2. 6.2. And there's quite a lot of exciting stuff in this release. We started off by really announcing that the fact that we now have Java and .NET Core GA support on Linux. So the Java SDK and the .NET Core SDK are now fully supported on this version going forward. Of course, if you didn't know already, the .NET Core was already supported in the 6.1 release that we did in January for Windows. So now you've got .NET Core support across Windows and Linux, and you've got Java support on Linux World as well. So that's kind of the top thing. The other side of it is that we introduced more feature work inside containers. We did lots of stuff around debugging, particularly seeing diagnostics, log files. You can launch containers now where you have commands for the Docker daemon about how it should launch. We introduced logs that you could see inside the Service Fabric Explorer in 6.1, but now we have more logs that come out that you see inside Service Fabric Explorer. And so I'd go look at the blog post around that stuff, so I think that's pretty exciting inside there. We introduced the concept of auto-scale at the application level. Woohoo!
Yes.
This is a pretty cool feature. You can go into policy, and you can describe a policy now, an auto-scale policy. You can set upper and lower thresholds. You can say if the threshold is above this or below that, add these number of instances, whether it's based upon CPU or memory, I think that's what it does today, or your custom policy. So that means now you can scale out the applications based on those. So I think that's pretty exciting.
Yep.
And then sort of finally, we did more stuff around diagnostics. We created this service called an event store service. And the event store service keeps a history of all of the operational events you did in the cluster. So it keeps a history of when you did an upgrade to the cluster for a runtime or this application deployment. And there's only a REST API of this at the moment, but you can query that store, the CLI for it, and the PowerShell will be coming in the next release. But you can query this event store for, say, when was the last time I did a particular event type, like a Service Fabric upgrade and things. So it's particularly useful inside support calls now, because often we have people who ask us when would they upgrade their cluster from version 6.1 to 6.2, and you can look at this event store now and find out. So I think that's a pretty exciting thing. Probably the final thing before you start diving into questions is that there'll be a version of Visual Studio coming out at the end of this month that will have integrated debugging in it for containers. So now you can do, in a Service Fabric project, debugging your containers locally inside Visual Studio on the development box. So that's a pretty exciting thing.
So for auto scale, Marcine's asking, will it work for stateful service, stateful sources as well, stateful services?
Probably not at this point, right?
No,
because there's not much that it can do. Because this is for stateless. It creates more instances or brings them back down again.
Yes, it does. This
yeah,
is
for stateless. For stateful, that's still a little ways away because we still need that fancy split and merge for partitions. Because all we can do for stateful right now is take the partitions you have, redistribute, but that requires you adding more hardware. So not quite yet, but that is the direction it's going. So think of this as kind of putting the infrastructure in place to make that possible later on.
Yes. Check out, I'll send you the link. If you, let me dig up the blog post.
He's been, well, yeah, put it in the.
Let me put the link in the window for that. I will just point as a blog.
Sounds like fun out there.
If you go to the,
Can't complain about it.
if you go to the,
Cupcakes for everybody.
Yeah, did you share? You want to share them with the?
I only see one cupcake.
Yeah.
I was just walking by, you want a cupcake? I was like,
Okay.
so I've just posted the Azure blog inside here. Actually, if you go into the Azure blog, there's a link here on autoscale. I can't remember about reliable services. Good question. So go and read.
Stateful services, right?
Stateful services, yeah. So go and read yourself. I'm pretty sure it's just stateless at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
watch team. Refreshing the blog. That's good.
Yeah. So dive into that blog, and yeah, there's some pretty good stuff. Oh, yeah. Actually, the final thing I forgot was that we actually finally previewed the backup and restore service. So we'll just check. We're going to make sure that that's available. So I'll just check that up as well later today.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Andrew says, continue with those discussions regarding the new auto scale feature. Are there some use cases, common scenarios for elastic stateful services?
Elastic Stateful Services?
Use cases, common scenarios for elastic stateful services. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that?
Sure. I was just noting that in the blog or in the post that mentioned that it can if you had your partitions 0, 1, and 2, it could add a third, fourth, and destroy them down again. Why would you want to do that to your state?
I see. Yeah, that was So there was some work done. It's with named partitions, so you can add new named partitions and then tear them down again. That's it's a bit of a different scenario. It's not really for auto scaling the stable services. It's kind of a different way to do. I think for stateless actually, just a different way to manage that. But it's somewhat unrelated though to auto scale.
Is there like a reason a pattern where you'd want to take advantage of that feature? I guess is what I'm asking.
That's the ability to have new named partitions for an existing deployment.
Yeah.
So when you deploy an application today, you can use named partitions. So like the letters of the alphabet. Yeah. And if I wanted to expand it out more, I could then have AA and AB and AC as an extension.
Yeah.
So really, it's just adding new partitions to an already deployed service. So it is a version of adding partitions.
But this one's kind of weird though. So the applications for this aren't actually for stateful really. It's more for stateless. It's a different way of scaling stateless services in and out by modeling them as partition services. So it's just kind of a different way of doing the same thing that you would do with stateless services. But the difference is that you would then be able to identify each one by a partition name rather than just an instance ID like you have today with stateless services. So there's a little more that's going to come a bit later that's sort of going to make use of this. But for now, I don't think there are a lot of real applications where you would use that.
We could do a better job of putting a description in the release notes. This was in the release notes, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that may be a little confusing then.
Yes. Yeah. We'll go back to the release notes and update it with a use case for it all to make it clearer.
Yeah.
Thanks for
I think that one needs an update.
Yes.
Or at least clarification.
So as always, now I've done my little intro. This is just a time for you, if you're new to this thing before, just to fire any question,
Ask away.
any choice that you want. And we will do our
What are
best
they calling
to
out AMA? Ask me anything.
Ask me anything.
Yes.
AMAA, ask me almost anything.
Oh yeah, that's good.
They do this.
So what is the appropriate response when you don't want to? This is outside the bounds of our
I guess.
almost.
Yeah.
Why not just AMS and ask me
I'll have to
something?
refer you to my attorney.
Right, Marcin asks, should I prefer named partitions over named service instances?
Did you miss?
We did
I
miss
missed
person
one.
another
Oh,
question.
This is the almost anything part that we're skipping.
Oh,
Yes,
sorry.
so there's
So-
a guy working on SFRP for on-premises.
See, this is the part where we're gonna say, ask us almost anything,
Oh, that's the
and
answer.
we're like,
Okay.
You might have to ask that guy.
yeah. We'll be talking about this a little bit more in the future, Marcin. Be on the lookout.
Yes.
Yeah, we're still investigating some things, and yeah,
So wink, wink, nod, nod.
yeah. Say no more.
We'll tell you more later. So should you prefer named partitions now over named service instances? No, I don't think so. I don't think I'd go that far. I mean, if you're already doing something like creating services dynamically on the fly, I would stick to that. But within then you have another layer where you can then create named partitions. But there's no reason to prefer that over one over the other. Yeah. The difference would be, that if you use named partitions, you would still refer to the same service instance. That's the only thing. So you use the same service name. But I don't see why I prefer one or the other. Patch orchestration application?
Assuming I'm using patch orchestration application and Windows 1709, is it automatically going to get upgraded to 1803? Well, that's the underlying OS, yes, as opposed to the patch orchestration application that patches the existing OS. So
This is actually a new image that would.
this is updating a new image. So this is you going to VM scale sets and saying, I want to update my VM scale set image, and they now support this now in GA, where you can go into the VM scale set and you say, I want to roll out a new image of my VM skill set and roll that out across the cluster, as opposed to the patch orchestration application that just patches the OS image that you have already.
But the problem with the image, the VMS image patching, is that it is not going to work with geographically distributed clusters, as far as I know. So I would like to stick to the patch orchestration application, but I don't really know what to do when the new version of Windows comes. Is it going to be upgraded using Windows Update, orchestrated by the patch orchestration application, or I don't know what to do.
Okay, but you're trying to do two problems here. So you're helping us wonderfully to do these cross-regional clusters that we're testing, and trying to make that all work, and there's many things that we have to do there to make them work, as you're finding out. The patch orchestration application, as it was designed today, is designed to kind of run on a cluster within sort of one region or one availability zone, availability zone region, to do the patching of the OS that it is today. It isn't supposed to go across cross-regional clusters and update the OSs across them all. I hear you that there's an issue that we have to resolve for the cross-regional clusters there. And it's how you coordinate updating each one of the regions for the VM scale set moving to their version of the OS yet. And I don't know we figured that out yet. So I think we're going to have to spend some time thinking about how to do that. Maybe we have to build something into package orchestration application, but at the moment, right now, we haven't got a solution. Yeah, the only thing the solution right now is for your cluster within inside a region, you have to use VM scale sets to go from 1709 to 1803 and roll it out that way. But there's no ability to go across regions. You're correct there. We haven't got a solution yet. So
thanks. So looking forward for guidance.
Yeah, well, as I said, we're working with Chaco on our team and Matt, and for everyone else on this call, we're trying to. There's two things that we've done while we're talking about the subject. One is that we published GA'd availability zones in Azure. That gives you multiple data centers in a region. And we'll be publishing a template ready for the beginning of May that allows you to publish secure and unsecure clusters across availability zones in a region. That makes sure, an availability zone is another level of fault domain. So if you imagine today when you deploy a cluster and you say I want 5 machines, we go to one data center and we go to the racks inside the data center. We pick one machine from each rack. Well, the availability zone is that there are certain regions where they have 4 data centers now. So when I deploy a cluster across an availability zone, we go for the minimum 3 machines across 3 racks in one data center, 3 machines across 3 racks in another data center, and 3 in another, or maybe you might choose 5. So if a data center goes down in a region, you survive a zone failure and keep it highly available. Then, of course, what we're also trying to do is cross-regional. For cross-regional, it's a lot harder because there are things like how do you patch the OSs, there are differences of key vaults in each region, there's how we set up networks across them all and things. And so mostly we're working through other Azure things to make that work.
So this leads into the next question of if VM scale sets rolls out this new image, then assumingly silver durability, will the service remain online, and will VMSS work with SF to ensure that nodes are updated one at a time? So it's not nodes one at a time, but it always happens one upgrade domain at a time, and you'll always have 5 upgrade domains. So if you have 25 nodes, you'll have 5 nodes per upgrade domain, then it'll upgrade 5 nodes at a time. But it always rolls out regardless of your durability level. Yeah. So that's something that VM scale sets in Azure in general always promises, is that these will always roll out one upgrade domain at a time. The durability level is just kind of what level of contract do you want between Service Fabric and the underlying Azure VM scale set or the hosting provider that says how much do they talk to each other, and how long will Azure wait on Service Fabric to say it's now okay to do this upgrade domain, I'm done moving stuff off of it. So the durability level just kind of decides on the contract. So at bronze, there's none. Azure doesn't ask Service Fabric whether or not it's okay to move on to the next upgrade domain yet. Silver durability then adds some time there where Azure will wait a certain amount of time, I think it's 30 minutes, for Service Fabric to respond and say, yeah, now it's okay to take this upgrade domain down. But regardless of durability, it's always one upgrade domain at a time.
Yes. So effectively, you can go to VM scale sets now. You can say upgrade as a new image, and those controls things will happen across upgrade domain. So silver, so the silver durability, it's a more stronger guarantee over how you can keep durable state in your cluster, because you may need more time in order to make sure things are safe if that's what you need. But if that's not what you need, then you don't have to.
Although you still probably want that for your primary node types, because system services, keep in mind, even if you don't do any stateful services, the system services themselves are stateful. So Service Fabric as a platform is a stateful platform. So there's always some stateful stuff. It just might not be your stuff. It might be the system services. And those system services are keeping track of what your services are doing, where they should be, and all that goodness. So you don't want those things losing data either. So Silver is usually a good idea for that reason.
Okay, so
compatibility between reliable collection formats on Windows and Linux. What is the compatibility story if I'm using reliable collections for some time on Windows and want to run them on Linux?
Like a .NET Core.
Well, so it actually there are a couple of ways that this can happen. So if you're using the managed reliable collections, that format should be compatible across the two. If you're using the native store is not currently cross-compatible with the managed store, so they use a slightly different format. We do intend to build some sort of a bridge so you can get from one to the other, but right now those two aren't cross-compatible, so it really depends on which one you're using.
How do I know which one I'm using?
Yeah, right. I can't remember where we are with that right now. I think it's all managed today, or is it down to the native already?
I think the native.
Could be.
Yes. I think everything's got moved to native now.
But if you're on Windows, it's still managed.
I think everything has been moved to native.
In 6.2.
In 6.2, yes. I mean, everything is a native store now, as an underlying store on everything. So I think all that work has happened. So I know that I'm pretty sure, let me double check this.
Yeah,
but I'm pretty sure everything runs on what we call our native store. When we say native, it's all written C++ instead of managed code. And you can try this out. You should be able to take a .NET Core application on Windows, back up and restore it, take the same application, move it over to Linux and restore it onto Linux, and it should work.
That should work, yeah.
And so you can do that.
But that's the point, though. It's not so much across operating system, it's across the store type, whether it's managed or native.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So backups are compatible, and that's more than enough.
Yes, you can do that. Yeah. So you can migrate applications between Windows and Linux using the backup and restore capabilities and the backup and restore format that we write out across the two.
So does autoscale support the scenario where you want to scale a stateless service based on custom metric, like queue count for level queue or something different for stateful service? If so, at a high level, what would be the recommended way to achieve this conceptually?
I believe we put custom metric in. I don't know if it's in this release here. So,
yeah, I think we'd have to check on that. I don't remember seeing custom metrics in this release, but we'd have to go back and check.
Yes, we've certainly. So the goal is yes to certainly have that. There's no question on it. I'm just trying to check now whether we put custom in the 6.2 release that's just come out, or we only just did certain thresholds, which were CPU and memory, and the custom wasn't there. So unfortunately, Matt Snyder, who's the one who's the expert on this, he's not here this week. He had to go off and travel, and he was the one who had the answers to this. So let me read the docs and find out in front of you, but it doesn't look like we put custom in this one for this particular release.
Without that, is there any other way to make it happen today?
Well, without that, you have to.
Well, you use the APIs and you kind of do it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of showed already inside the docs. There's this code example that says that today about how you scale it up yourself, where you show code looking at some custom value and then updating the actual service itself in terms of the number of instances that are running. This takes place of that effectively, in that it allows you to have built-in metrics, and the custom metric So otherwise you have to write code yourself. There's an article for this inside.
We've done it. We've done it before. I guess I was just wondering if it was something that I'd be able to offload back to, to let Service Fabric handle it. But the docs do say that logical load metrics are included. I'm not sure if that would include custom metrics, but.
So that would, if it says logical, so logical load metrics basically means anything that you report through the load metrics API. So that should work as long as you're reporting it.
Oh,
right.
okay.
So the question was then geared towards, would it matter that the metric was reported really for a different service than the one you're trying to scale? I wasn't sure if that played a role into the scaling process.
Oh, I see. I mean, yeah, that's a good question. I would have to imagine you'd have to report it on the service that you want to scale, not on other services. But you can, I mean, that's possible too. You can do that. You can have one service report metrics on behalf of another service.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's an API for that. It's different than you wouldn't say this .partition.load report load metrics. It would be on Fabric client, but you should be able to do that.
Okay, so the thought is right now that if you want to do the scaling, the metric has to be on the partitions of the service that you're actually trying to scale.
Right.
Yes. But I imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, we've also had this.
It wouldn't make sense any other way, right? Because it might not even be on the same node type, for example.
Okay, let's see. I think that's a durability question here.
What's the difference between silver and gold?
Yep.
Other than the longer wait time on gold.
Well, gold gives you the gold only can be applied
Dedicated
on
hardware.
fully dedicated machines. So in the D series today, it's the D15 machines, and you take the whole machine, and you get a longer timer.
Yeah, so you get a much longer time, but I don't think there's anything else, right?
There's no
that gold gives you.
It's just that you can only do gold on the
Yeah.
full machine that you own.
That's the requirement.
That's
Yeah,
the
but
requirement, because you're trying to schedule these differences, because bronze means that you have no control over it whatsoever, you're just given the default. Silver means you get a bit longer, but don't forget you might be on a shared machine, so you can't wait for, not everyone can block everyone for a long period of time. Gold is, you own a machine, you can block it for, actually it's as long as, it's a much longer period of time. You can
it's a
block
few
it.
hours.
2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can block it for 2 hours as opposed to.
Silver is 10 minutes, not 30 minutes, by the way.
10 minutes?
Yeah, pause for duration. You can pause for 10 minutes.
Pause for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's on top of the standard.
In on top of the standard 30
which
minutes.
is, I think, is.
There you go.
Yeah, so it's not that it's not possible.
So I think bronze gives you the standard, which is just 10. Silver then gives you another 10 more longer if you want it. And then gold gives you, I thought it was longer than 2 hours.
So I just looked at our docs. So bronze basically gives you no privileges to pause a job. Silver gives you, I think, 30 minutes of wait time plus 10 minutes pausing privilege, and then gold gives you a 2 hour
Yes.
pausing duration on top of the regular
Yeah, but you can
up
only
to 2 hours
yeah.
of wait from VM. So you could actually be doing 4 hours per UD. If you
Yes, you can completely hold on to the whole machine until the goal. And so you have to have D15s is what people typically do that on. We are owning the whole machine.
That's right.
Let's see. So we learned that Docker images with Windows OS do not sign with Azure third-party code signing and certificate. Any updates for ETA on that? Good question. That one I don't know.
What did you say that question again?
That's, it just scrolled up. Yeah. It says, we learned that Docker images with Windows OS are now signed with Azure third-party code signing certificate. Do you have any updates or ETA on that?
No, I think are you referring to the Microsoft deployed images that we have for like .NET course, 1709 runtime and all the base images? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and because they're not signed, is that because they're not signed that they fail on deployment? Or what's the issue?
No, it's just about the compliance. Like we learned that from Intune team about their experience about Service Fabric with containers. They mentioned that due to this issue, they are not yet ready to actually go with the Docker containers. So far, they are just deploying the services as microservices. So we are developing some new services. We are exploring Service Fabric with Docker. We are just thinking if that is going to block us, or if there is any compliance issue, or.
I hadn't heard of this issue blocking people from deploying containers in any way. I was deploying whole set this morning, so I haven't heard of this issue, but I will check. Let me see if I can find out now as we sit here. But I hadn't heard of this as a blocking issue. There's been we've had a few other blocking issues, not blocking issues, where the Docker images are different between Windows 2016 and 1709, and so you have to rebuild them because you can't run a 2016 image on a 1709 server and things because they're not backwardly compatible, and so you have to have two different types inside there. We've also had that was one of the things as well.
Okay.
I hadn't heard of this one.
Got it.
Let me just ping someone and see if I can find out.
In the meantime, when's Application Insights going to start working deep?
Oh, tell everyone about the excitement of Application Insights V2 next week.
Yeah. So is that what you meant when you said when it's going to start
That's the
working?
next question. Application
That's the
Insights,
next
is it going to eventually work properly with Service Fabric? That's a very fair question.
It works quite well with Service Fabric. So we just shipped an update. Well, we didn't, but the App Insights folks shipped an update to their AI SDK for Service Fabric that basically enables it to work properly now for V2 remoting. So the issue that we had was starting in November for the folks that had switched over to V2 remoting, proper correlation of activity in the cluster as well as dependency tracking of behaviors across services was not showing up correctly. So that has now been updated. And it's a new version. I believe it's 2.1.1 for the NuGet that you can download into your services and get that to show up. So that should give you like the app map that they have in App Insights, as well as being able to track activity and operations across each of your services. So you can see if something goes wrong, all the steps that happened across each of your services to get to that point. We still have some things that we need to do beyond this. Some of them are based on just improving the experience of setting up App Insights with your services, but we're also looking specifically at things like there's a gap today where not all of the perf counters that App Insights is able to provide, align with things you'd want to see in Service Fabric. So there's a couple of gaps out there that we're looking on ways to plug. But if you have any specific feedback, it'd be super helpful in helping us sort of drive like the things that we're prioritizing when it comes to improving that experience. So please reach out. It'd be really helpful to see.
It's Marcin.
Is that what you?
Okay, so you know how to get to us. So please let me know.
Is that what you had in mind, Marcin? That wasn't working. Was the
Not really, because I'm using not service remoting but HTTP, and Mikkel helped me to get past one issue. He helped me to influence the Application Insights to at least fix the first issue, and the issue was the following. If you are using Service Fabric in a shared process hosting model, you have more than one web host. It's like when you have multiple instances of the service that runs under the same process, you have multiple web hosts, yes? The other solution is when you have, the other situation is when you have two listeners in one process, one on one port and one on another, then you have also two web hosts. And the previous issue was so bad, it was killing outgoing HTTP connections from the cluster, because multiple web hosts were inducing invalid handling of diagnostic events that Application Insights were listening, and the Application Insights were crashing all the outgoing traffic from the cluster, from the application. So it was really terrible. It took me 3 days to figure out what's going on, because I didn't have any telemetry, because nothing was leaving the application.
Yeah, right.
So Mikkel helped me to figure out this issue, and there is one more issue remaining. Now, when you have multiple web hosts, you have duplicate telemetry, because each web host is reporting each telemetry. So if you have 5 web hosts, you have each telemetry reported 5 times. So if you could put more pressure on the application inside Steam to make this work, it would be really a really big value.
Okay.
So Marcin, could you do me a favor and send me an email with this again? Because that's how we were able to apply the right pressure the first time around. Because we're like, hey, look, here's a customer that has this exact use case. Here's the generalized scenario where it's going to impact more people, and that's sort of how we were able to prioritize the problem in their backlog.
Oh, okay, I can send you the GitHub issues about this.
Or just tell me what the number is, and we can start tracking that. So, so Mikkel was basically able to get Brownness to help step in and solve that. So hopefully we can do the same thing.
Was the problem just because you had multiple web hosts in the same process? Like if you do one web host per process, that's solve it?
Yeah. Yes. So if you are using exclusive process hosting model and one listener per process, everything works perfectly. But if
incidentally, using one replica per process tends to make a lot of things work a lot better. So I generally do recommend that just as a good thing to do.
So for the other person who was concerned about it in the thread, because somebody was like, does it not work? It does work as long as you're using.
Yeah, I always recommend using an exclusive process anyways. That's not to say it shouldn't work, otherwise it should, but if that's one solution to this, or at least a workaround.
But the problem is that I really need a shared process hosting model because I have quite bulky processes. And I would like to provide a service per tenant, yes? So a stateful service per tenant, which has separate backups and separate APIs, separate endpoints, but that will reuse a lot of runtime images and stuff like that.
So you get a lot of shared DLLs, like it's pretty large when you process. I see. Okay. Yeah, gotcha. Okay.
Okay, I'm still trying to find out about Docker images, but no one's replying to me. But let's keep going.
Let's move on for now. Where were we? Okay. Why do items stored in reliable collections need new references to be updated, decopied? There's no explanation of the docs. So it's not required. It'll work without it. The problem is if you take a reference to an object in a reliable collection and you start changing properties, and then you have to abort the transaction, what will happen is that local replica, the object will have been updated, but the secondaries will not. So now you have an inconsistency problem. So as long as your transactions never abort, and you never have failures or exceptions or crashes, everything will be fine. But if you change a property on a reference and then for whatever reason you have to abort the transaction, there's nothing we can do to go back and undo the change to the .NET object that you made. So we'll roll back any changes that were replicated, but the primary now has different data than the secondaries, and that's usually a bad situation to get into. So just to be safe, just to be on the safe side, we recommend making a deep copy of the object. That way you avoid that situation entirely. And there was a document on this.
There is a document. There's a subgroup describes you should use deep copy.
Maybe it doesn't explain it well enough.
If you look in reliable, there's a reliable
I can go back and look at that doc and update that one too if it's not
underneath.
It's not there.
It's underneath reliable services.
Yeah, because I know we had one that specifically tells you to do deep copies.
This is one working with reliable collections.
Right, that's the one. Yeah.
This is the one that tells you to do deep copy. Inside here, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. But I think he was asking probably why, but he didn't give enough an explanation. So
makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, will I be able to install my own Service Fabric Linux cluster on premise? Coming soon. Let's just put it this way.
Well, in theory, you could go build Service Fabric from the GitHub repo and deploy it to a Linux cluster if you wanted to today.
Yes.
But from the actual offering that we'd like to provide a path for, we're working on it now, and there is a path.
Yeah. Let's just say, we're pretty sure that come May, we'll have the approach to do this, so you can take it that way. Probably actually a little bit later.
Let's say June.
Of June, yes. It's that's the direction we're trying to. We're definitely going there. That's the thing. It's just that we're making sure that as Deep said, really go to our open source repo today and build it, and then you got it. Just take it yourself.
So that option exists,
of course. But of course, you want the official, Microsoft built version. If you want the Microsoft built version,
we have to wait a little bit longer.
We're just trying to make a way that you can get hold of the package easy and deploy it easier onto your machines, rather than having to search and find the binaries and find links and things like that. And we would much rather that there's just an endpoint that you ask for and get all these stuff from it. So it's kind of that approach that we're trying to get to.
Yeah.
So, yes. We did ship Red Hat Linux, actually. That's the other thing I forgot. Red Hat Linux is part of the 6.2 release. So that was our Linux, other thing that we did inside Linux. So it's preview still. So it's going to still take a few months to finally get to GA, but you can have two types of Linux distro now.
When will I be able to run SF native Java applications and services in a Windows cluster?
Well, this is the next thing that we have to decide how important it is and how much ask we've had. And we certainly had a direction of doing that, yes?
Yeah, I mean, the only problem is we haven't set up automated testing and testing infrastructure for Java on Windows. So it runs, but we haven't, we haven't done our due diligence in testing it to call it something that we can support. But I think it's kind of on our backlog, but it's probably going to be a little ways out. If that's something that is pretty important to you, though, let us know, and we might be able to bump that up, just depending on the feedback we get.
Yeah, I'd love to know how important that is. Post into GitHub. I don't know, we post in GitHub issues. Oh. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just post into GitHub issues your desire to see this.
Yeah, it's prioritization issue mainly for us, and then the effort that we put into testing it and documenting it. But we can make it happen if need be.
Okay, I'm seeing, can I configure 6.2 backups with C# API Fabric client?
Can I configure backups with C# API client or with Fabric client?
When you say configure,
yeah, what do you mean by configure? I mean, not that I know of. I don't believe the APIs are in Fabric client.
Yeah,
it's not that I know of. Again, backup's not really my area, so I'm not sure. But
backup's on a reliable service, yes.
Yeah.
So, I think maybe you're asking this. Well, you say Fabric client. There's a service now. Maybe you're asking for what's the client that does the backup.
Oh, for the backup restore service.
Yeah, I mean, maybe are you referring to? We published this now.
Yes, I'm referring to the backup restore service, and
Yes.
I was thinking if I can configure it from Fabric client, and I am thinking about different ways of configuring the policies, for example, using ARM template, and I am thinking about how I can configure the policies, how I can configure backup policies for specific services and stuff like that, and looking for different solutions here.
Well, okay, so in the backup and restore service at the moment, it's a service that you go and configure in your ARM template and deploy into your cluster, just like you deploy other services inside your cluster. And at the moment, being in preview, it's a little bit limited in the sense of the only way you can communicate with this thing is over a REST API to call this.
Okay.
So that's what you have right now. Now we're going to add PowerShell and CLI, so you can call it that way. But there's a REST endpoint. If you're going to look at the docs, there's REST examples inside here for backup and restore.
Oh, okay, thanks. So I should use the REST API for this.
Yes.
And do you plan to add the ARM support for configuring the policies? It would be really helpful.
Yeah, you mean adding and removing capabilities into the cluster?
No, I mean by configuring some predefined policies. For example, backup every 15 minutes to the specific blob storage account, and so I can associate this policy later to my specific service.
Yes, we haven't got to that stage yet at the moment. At the moment, the backup and restore is just APIs that you can call, initiate the backup and removes it. Then, of course, you're talking about some scheduling policies around all that. So I think that will come, but we haven't got that yet in any way. So we've got to at least just finish. Here's this backup and restore service that you can set up and run. When you desire, hooking this up to a policy thing. It's good feedback. We haven't thought about getting to that level just yet, but it makes sense. But not currently.
Okay, thanks.
Going back to the backup and let me think.
Did we get all Marcine's backup questions? I think so.
This is on top of the securely possible storage credentials.
I think so.
Yeah, we got those. Yeah. Then the next one is, let's assume I have multiple front-end IPs in my Azure load balancer. Can I guarantee that a specific container will have a specific egress IP?
Well, you can.
Specific egress IP?
Ingress.
Yes, I mean the outgoing IP. So, for example, I can authenticate, use the IP for authentication, yes? So, a partner has a site and he wants to make a whitelist of IP addresses allowed. And I say that only this container will be able to go out using this IP address.
We have one load balancer, but multiple IPs on that load balancer.
Yes.
I don't know off the top of my head a way to guarantee that you will use one of those specific IPs. But wouldn't you want to whitelist both of those, though?
I'm sorry?
Oh, I was saying I don't know of a specific way. I don't know a way off the top of my head to specify what the outgoing IP is going to be of a container if you have two IPs in your load balancer, if you have two VIPs. I'm not sure a way to do that.
There are some rules about Azure Load Balancer standard that has more predictable SNAT, but I'm still thinking if it is possible with current networking modes, or it will require a new networking mode to get stuff like that. For example, can I associate a specific internal IP address with my container, or is it going to be associated randomly always? I'm looking for different solutions, so I'm just brainstorming here.
Yeah, that I'm not sure.
That I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not. That's more of a question to the networking guys.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to get some people to dig into that one for you.
Sorry, Jen, can't help you there.
Yeah, I'd recommend maybe post that one up on GitHub, and we'll see if we can throw some people at it that would know. But I really don't know off the top of my head on that one.
Let's see here. Yeah, sorry, can't help you there.
No problem, thanks.
I think this one's for you, Mark. This is from Mark. We've tested an unsecured and certificate-based cluster security model. We're testing AD security utilizing a GMSA. However, if you specify security server certificate attribute to allow HTTP traffic to be encrypted, the cluster creation process blows up. So that's in your ARM template, server certificate. If you specify that in the ARM template,
Well,
and what do you
this
need?
is all on premise. This is
all on premise.
This is on premise.
Oh, this is all on premise.
We've tested unsecured and we've tested unsecured certificate-based cluster security. Yeah, we're testing AD security using GSMA. Yeah, how if you specify
I see.
the server security attribute to allow the HTTP traffic to be encrypted. So this is the cluster creation brought it up. Testing the AD security. So you can run accounts. I don't understand if you specify the security.
What HTTP traffic are you encrypting? Is it HTTP traffic to the cluster or to your applications or reverse proxy or something else?
Yeah, because the GSMA accounts are generally you can run you can run all your processes on premise under a GSMA account, a group management account. Yes. So you can, if your cluster is attached to an Active Directory and you have Active Directory groups inside all those, the GSMA is allowed to me to sped up how you deploy all the accounts, whether it's the Service Fabric accounts or your applications under a GSMA account. Then I presume when you say certificate, this is we're testing AD security.
Oh, I see. So HTTP traffic to SFX. Yeah, so that's the management endpoints. Okay, so you want your server certificate to be used, to secure the management endpoints, and that blows up during cluster creation.
Would this work with just an SA
We're testing
account? So I'm wondering if it has something to do with the GMSA.
With a service account?
Yeah. Would this work with just a service account?
Can you send us your
Interesting.
allow the
Open up a GitHub issue.
cluster creation?
We might have to take a look at this cluster settings.
Yes, I think opening up a GitHub issue would be a good next step to
Yeah.
again investigate there.
Or go to support. Yes. We've tested unsecured. We're testing AD security.
Hard to say. Yeah.
That's something.
Without looking at the cluster settings, it's kind of hard to say.
I mean, I think what you're trying to say, hopefully what you're trying to say is, I've set up, what you can do is you can run all the processes under a group managed account. When you communicate with that particular account from outside of the cluster or even into the cluster, you should be able to use credentials for the process it's running under. So say you're talking from say you're talking with inside your network and they're all inside the AD domain, and my client I'm talking about, and I don't know if this is what it's referring to, gets the credentials to be able to talk underneath that group managed account, it should allow authentication to that service from outside the cluster based on that group managed account. It's no different from what Active Directory does today. So hopefully that's what you're asking for. The fact that it blows up your cluster, it's best to either go through a support ticket and just raise a support ticket and go through Azure support, and we'll help you because ultimately they're pretty good at that, and they'd rather look at what's wrong inside your cluster manifest.
If it's blowing up the cluster should go to support.
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't blow up your cluster. You should catch these errors beforehand. So maybe we have an issue there. We have to figure out. But you can certainly run under GSMA accounts on premise. Oh, maybe we should purchase something else.
You said the cluster is running under the context of the GMSA. The AD domain is securing the cluster.
Yes.
But
let's.
I don't know.
The cluster is running under the context of GSMA account. Yes, so you're running fabric.exe underneath the GSMA account, and then are you launching your applications under a GSMA account? Or is this about just you securing the cluster for fabric.exe running under the GSMA account? Sounds like you're doing that one. You're making fabric.exe run under a GSMA account. Yeah, let's.
I think this might be a little too in depth for us to dig into right now. Let me get you a link for where you can open up a support ticket. That's probably going to be the best way to go for this one.
I see. Oh, it is underneath. This is how you access the cluster. So, okay. So, yeah. So what you're asking for, this is how I access the cluster. So on our cluster, you access the cluster through the management endpoint under two different roles. You can do an admin role and non-admin role, and you're asking whether I can, underneath how I access the cluster, run those underneath GSMA accounts. Yes, you can, and it should work, and it shouldn't blow up. So maybe there's a yes.
So bug.
Well, we're just gonna figure out how we look at your configuration there and make sure that it's set up in your environment correctly. But it shouldn't blow up your cluster. If it is, there may be a bug there. But yes, you can certainly configure the access to the account with GSMA accounts for the management endpoint. Raise a support ticket, it'll eventually come to us and then we'll have to figure it out, or even post as well on something like GitHub issues as well, to see how our engineers on the team can look at your example and see if there's anything wrong with it. But it should work, yes.
Okay, any recommendations of how to debug a Service Fabric cluster that spans multiple applications on my local machine?
I think, are you saying you're deploying?
Not sure what you mean by that. A cluster that spans.
Well, like for example, if I have the application open up in Visual Studio, I've got one that's it's just multiple applications, across different code repos. So they all deploy to the same cluster in Azure, but at least locally I can't. If I just hit debug on each of them, they don't see each other, I guess, on the local cluster. So since the remote tools aren't working, do you have any suggestions on how to, I guess, test them all? Because they all have dependencies on each other, so they all just fail locally.
Oh, okay, so you have multiple applications on the same cluster locally.
I think I have a solution.
Go ahead. We love that.
Okay.
Thanks,
I don't want to interrupt you, but I have a working solution because you can, when you are spawning new applications, when you are creating new applications from the already loaded packages to the cluster, you can pass the magical __WF debug params parameter. It is a parameter that works with any application, and you can copy and slightly alter the parameters you have received to the application you are debugging. So you can, I'm using this approach because I have one application that spawns all the other applications. So I'm just passing the WF debug params from the original application, and it makes the other application attach the Visual Studio, and everything is all processes are debugged by the single instance of Visual Studio. So this should work for you.
So so in that situation, Marcin, you have one application that dynamically creates other applications at runtime, right?
Yes.
And then you need to attach a debugger to them. Yeah, that'll work. That should work. You can also, in Visual Studio, you can also, if you don't have that situation, but if you just have, like, say, 3 applications that just need to launch, and you need to attach a debugger to them, you can set multiple startup projects in Visual Studio. So whenever you hit F5 or Control F5, it'll automatically attach a debugger to all of them and start them up at the same time. I mean, the order in which they actually come up is not guaranteed.
Well, if you do the multiple startup, I guess, will that span multiple instances of Visual Studio? Because they're all in separate solutions.
Oh, they're in separate solutions. I see.
You can also consider creating.
That's within one. That would be within one solution. You can do that. If they're across multiple solutions, then I don't know how you get a debugger instance. I mean, you could attach a debugger manually from one Visual Studio instance, but you have to launch them all first. So Marcin's solution might be a little better there.
You can also create a solution just to launch the other applications, just yet another solution, such a debug solution.
And that's the direction I'm working towards, just since I can't, remote debug them, is, just have one solution over them all. The downside being then I have to, especially if I'm making iterative changes between them, that's more trouble to keep all the code in sync.
Mm. And do you need, so like when they start up, do they immediately start talking to each other, and is that why you need a debugger attached right away when they start?
Well, yes. I mean, eventually, if I make a call, say, to one of them as a web host, it's going to want to talk to the actors, and that's going to want to talk to a stateful service or what have you.
Right. Yeah, okay.
But if you are, so my recommendation would be to use one application to spawn other applications and pass the WF debug params to all the applications. So this should work for you, but I will send you a code snippet that should be helpful to overcome a small glitch there. So.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Marcin.
All right. So let's see. What do we got next?
The next one is on premise.
Yeah, can you force a Windows standalone cluster to check for the 6.2 update right now?
Can you, Deep?
The gold state file, what did 6.2? Yeah.
No. Yeah, I've got my on-premise cluster.
Yeah.
Is there any way that you can, without...
You can query the gold state, the available gold state files of a cluster.
By using get service registered cluster code version?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's not showing 6.2 yet, apparently.
I see.
Yeah,
Let me check right now.
Oh yeah, no. So the question is, have we published 6.2 yet?
Mm-hmm.
It's in a download center where you
That's
can
right.
where you can pick up the version of this. And the answer is we have announced 6.2, and we're basically rolling it out across the different regions and publishing it to our download center at that link at the moment.
I'm just going to check when it's going to go live.
Let's check when it's going to go live, and it'll probably take a day or so, whatever it is, yes, because there's when we published it and then when the download center has it available and things like this. So coming soon.
I'm just checking. We'll know before we get off the call.
All right. Are all features, statefulness, actors interface, remoting covered in the Java SDK, and what's the strategy for cross-language support going forward? So yeah, everything that's in .NET eventually makes its way to Java. Java's usually about a version behind or so, but all that stuff will make its way into the Java SDK as well.
But I think the Java SDK that we published now has reliable services, reliable actors.
Yeah.
All there.
It should all be there.
It's all be there.
Again, when features come out in these areas in .NET, usually Java will be about a version behind if there's something new. But all the features should essentially be there.
But with this 6.2 release, I think
in the 6.2 release, I think it's all there. Yeah,
it's all there.
Remoting. And the strategy for cross-language support going forward. So cross-language. So we're taking a slightly different approach to how we handle that, and it's still kind of baking, but we'll have something out for you soon. Where we're kind of taking an approach that's more language agnostic, so that all languages sort of treated equally, and there will be libraries that essentially that you'll import for specific languages, and we'll ultimately target C#, Java, probably Node, JS initially, and then have more to follow. But that's just in terms of what languages are supported by the platform. Cross-language, if you mean like cross-language support in terms of can, for example, a Java service talk to a C# service. For that, we start gravitating more a little towards, okay, so that's probably what you're referring to, right? So for that, we're looking at it's basically the communication stack. The remote and communication stack is always language dependent because they're it's kind of doing this code gen of types. So that will always be language dependent. It won't necessarily be cross-language. What we're moving towards is more language agnostic protocols for service-to-service communication with proxies in between to do service discovery. So the idea is instead of using the remoting, you'd use something language agnostic like HTTP or potentially gRPC, which has better cross-language support. So that's kind of the direction we're going, more towards those more well-known language agnostic protocols and away from the language specific ones, which
Are you going to support gRPC? It would be so great.
Yeah, I mean, so the work we're doing right now is we're pulling in the Envoy proxy as the mechanism for communication between services, and that has native support for gRPC, so we'll essentially get it through that. So that's kind of in the plans right now is supporting gRPC through Envoy as well as HTTP and HTTP2, and those will likely be the protocols going forward that are most common. Of course, you can always bring your own protocols if you want. You don't necessarily have to use the ones that we provide out of the box. But yeah, through that mechanism, you should have much better cross-language support. And of course, you can do that with the reverse proxy today. But again, that's just HTTP. So in that case, you're just doing HTTP between services, and the reverse proxy is just the way to get message from one place to the other.
As far as I know, there is a small problem with the reverse proxy because it doesn't support HTTP2, and so it means that you cannot use bidirectional streaming of gRPC messages.
Yeah, we're fixing that one too by replatting the reverse proxy onto Envoy, which is HTTP2 native. They do HTTP2 first above all else. So by replatting that onto Envoy, we'll get HTTP2 support, and then that'll give you that bidirectional streaming.
Do you have any timeline for the Envoy? And is the Envoy upgrade going to be? How is it going to happen? Is it going to come suddenly in one version upgrade, or is it going to be alternative?
No, it's actually going to be a separate application. So we actually have it up on GitHub now. If you search for Service Fabric Reverse Proxy, that's actually out there. So you can grab that. It's on Linux only because Envoy currently only runs on Linux. So we're working on that Windows port. But it's just an application like anything else that you would deploy into your cluster. And so you can just start using it that way. It's basically the same features as the current reverse proxy. The one difference that we did was that instead of query string parameters for routing, you use HTTP headers instead, but otherwise it's basically the same thing. But it's just an application that you deploy. So your applications won't break because we're not going to remove the existing reverse proxy on you. But if you want to start making use of the Envoy one, it's just an application you download and deploy.
Okay, so we will get notified when it's ready for Windows, yes?
Yes, exactly. That's also up on GitHub too. If you go to GitHub in the Microsoft org, we have a fork of the Envoy proxy there. And that's
I'm monitoring the fork.
You do? Okay, yeah. Excellent.
Of course you are.
Of course Marcin does. I don't know why I asked.
Okay, can I use reliable collections in containers now? Or is there something still not fully complete? Well, we do have it as a preview. Let me publish the link.
It's a few steps to get it up and working.
And it's a few steps to get it up and running. So if you can follow these steps, and it will get you your reliable collections running there. I think it's only stateless ones at the moment. Stateless reliable collections, I think.
You mean reliable services?
Stateless reliable services, yes. So you can. I can't remember if it's stateless and stateful. I'll have to. But there are some steps here that you can do through it all to try that out. And we're working to make this more full class so that we can just do it out of the box. We were first just trying to make sure that we had all of our other container images and diagnostics. We focused a lot on diagnostics with containers in the 6.2 release, and also the Visual Studio support just around that. So as we go ahead now, getting our reliable services easily into containers and having support around those will be our next focus. But it's there as a preview if you follow those steps, and give us some feedback on those if you think that they're overly complex, because they do have a number of steps. So give it a try.
Nobody there.
Here we got 5 minutes.
Where are we?
Well, the question on code signing, I haven't been able to get anyone to reply, I'm afraid. So I don't really know what the code signing position is around that. Let's try and see if we can find some of the Windows container team.
So the new standalone 6.2 package is available in the download center.
Oh, okay.
It usually goes live at the same time as the release runs. I'm surprised why that query is not returning
If you run it here, what does it give you there?
the option. It's a great question.
All right, we got a chance for the last few questions, if you have any. What is the future of container networking? Do you plan to have support Calico? Is there any networking mode that's going to be a silver bullet?
Silver bullet? You know there are no silver bullets.
Well, we have 2 networking modes available today. We have the port to host mapping one, your NAT one, which is the one that we've had there, from the very beginning, where you effectively open up a port in your container, you open up one on your host, you map between the 2 of them all, and that allows you to take advantage of the host networking to communicate between these things. In the 6.1 release that we did, you can see that now there's this thing called Open Network for containers, and what that does is it sets up a virtual network across your cluster so that every container that gets deployed within inside your cluster gets its own IP address range from that VNet. So what that means is that, say you set up a VNet range which is 10.0.0.1 and things like that, you'll see the IP addresses assigned first to the hosts inside the actual machines themselves in that VNet range, and then when you deploy containers you might get 10.0.0.20, 10.0.0.21 and things like that. So that means that you can have sort of these IP addresses on the containers you can talk between. The mode that will be coming in the 6.3 release that we've been working on a while, but we didn't quite make it in for the 6.2 is also then this isolated network. And an isolated network allows you to have multiple applications deployed, and each one of them runs within inside their own VNet. So all the services inside an application run inside their own VNet. And so it allows you to have this sort of multi-tenant deployment now, where only the services can see the others inside the same application, and you can't see outside of that, and it's isolated that way. So those are the 3 networking modes that we're going to support. I remember
that one mode seems to handle the egress scenario I was asking before, I think. The isolated one.
Well, the isolated one will mean that you will have, say, you can have like each application has its own VNet. So they all have 10.0.1 and the same with this one over here. And then each one of them will have to expose their own public end. Yes.
It can be on a different load balancer, and it can be configured very freely, I think, so it sounds nice.
Exactly. We just didn't quite manage to squeeze it into the 6.2 release, but it will be there in 6.3 for certain things like that, maybe if we, because, yeah. So that if, and I can't remember Calico now. I remember it was some, I remember, I'll have to go back and remember myself, but those are the networking modes. So I guess they depend on the, and eventually that open networking one as well, we'll make sure that the IP addresses are static. So in the open networking world, as the containers move across it all, if it started off at 10.0.1, it'll remain 10.0.1 when it starts on another machine. So that's the final phase to all that, which will make it quite convenient for keeping IP addresses on these things. And the open networking world is useful mostly if you want to have the same port number for different containers running on the same machine. So where we see it work quite a lot is where people have a lot of existing applications, they want to put them all inside containers, they all run on port 80, and so they can't change that code, it has to be port 80, but now I can run 5 applications of different containers all running on port 80 with different IP addresses on the same set of machines, and then just expose out each one of those. I still have to expose those out through the Azure Load Balancer and have a mapping in front of them all, but at least it makes it easier.
All right, a couple last questions to get to here. So the question about actors, it's difficult to replace a database with the actor framework because you can't do aggregate pulls. Yeah, I mean, if you find yourself in a situation where you're using actors as a database, I would say definitely want to rethink that. Yeah, this is actually this is one of the problems with actors is it's the state storage within actors is just kind of meant to kind of hold a piece of state while you're doing computation in a distributed computation scenario, but you definitely don't want to use it as a replacement for a database or even a replacement for a key value store. And the reason is because of the single threaded access will make things very difficult to you, because a read operation on an actor will block another read operation on the same actor. So you can't have parallel reads on the same actor. And this obviously causes throughput issues if you're trying to do anything at scale. Where if you have, for example, if me and Deep are trying to get the same piece of information from the Mark actor, he has to wait until I'm done reading from him. And if Mark comes in and tries to do a read, now he has to wait for me and Deep to finish reading, and so it all kind of collapses on you. So yeah, if you find yourself in that situation where you're looking at doing queries or aggregates of any state across actors, you should probably rethink that and look to either reliable collections if you can do queries effectively within a partition. But if you can't and you need more complex querying capability, then something like DocDB or even SQL is probably a better choice for that. So really be careful about that.
Cool. No, it makes sense. I kind of ran into that thinking backwards about it and thought,
Yeah.
is there just
Yeah.
something I'm missing about this? But no, that makes sense.
You're not missing anything at all. It's really not meant for that scenario at all.
It's not meant for querying style lots of stuff.
Right. It's one of those things where if you can take like a computational problem and split it up into a bunch of pieces and then aggregate it later, it can be kind of useful for that. It'll give you an easy way to do that, but definitely not for just general querying or state storage even.
Okay, Mark is asking about Windows Defender and dynamic port ranges and the fact that Defender blocks all the dynamic port ranges that get allocated by Service Fabric and you have to open them up manually.
So this is odd. I wonder if this is something new in 1709 because the dynamic port range that Service Fabric allocates, one of the things it does is it goes into the Windows firewall and opens those ports, or at least makes them accessible for when your applications are deployed. So I wonder if that was a bug in 1709. And it sounds like you weren't seeing this before.
Yes, sounds like you weren't seeing this before. Please raise this as a GitHub issue.
Yeah, definitely open an issue for this one because it sounds
like
like
where the
there could
GitHub
be a bug
issue is
there.
if you go to that support link.
Actually, let me put that in the window here.
Yeah, because if that's the case,
Yeah, that's not right.
we've had a few issues with people running virus checkers, and the virus checkers. One thing we ran into is that virus checkers locked the image repository uploading, and they were sitting there, and it's prevented you from uploading new images into your cluster because you didn't specifically exclude the image repository file path inside. As another example, but these port ranges should work, shouldn't they?
They should work, yeah.
Okay, it was suggested. Oh, that's the same thing.
I think that's it.
Okay, I think that's it.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
And, 6.2 there's available. It's available in his at the end there. He's just ran
Thanks a lot.
That's me.
There you go.
up there. Oh, you did. Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
that was you.
I did.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, thank you once again.
Thanks.
If you were on this call this morning and you weren't there at 10 o'clock and 8 o'clock, we apologise a little bit.
A little bit?
Yeah,
A little bit.
A little bit.
Just a little
And we'll make sure we're clearer about the time again for you next time.
Yeah, the blog should be the source of truth for the time, so we'll make sure that that's the case.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone.
Well, will y'all be at Build somewhere?
Yes, we're all
yeah,
build.
yeah.
Please
Come
come
see
to
us.
build. If you come to build, you will, and you get to us on the first day,
T-shirts.
we'll have lots of t-shirts. So
Great.
please come to build. Say, I love the community call.
That's right. The
We'll do
next
t-shirts.
community call
Yeah,
is
it's after
after
Bill.
Bill.
We should have
That's
after
right.
Bill.
Yeah, so yeah, come to Bill,
Come to
please.
Bill.
Come
Yes,
say hi. We'll have a
we've
booth.
tried
We'll
to
have a
do
booth.
lots of exciting stuff for Bill.
I think
We do actually.
we might be doing a talk or something.
Yeah, we're doing it
So
something.
come watch.
Or something? Great.
Or
Thank you.
something.
Not sure, not sure.
We'll make sure that we update the schedule in the advisors and Yammer, so you guys know.
Yes. If you're at Bill, please come and see us. Grab
Yeah.
a t-shirt, grab a sticker.
Yeah.
We'll love to see you.